The penthouse door slammed shut, and Isabella's voice echoed through the marble hallway like broken glass scraping against stone. "Get out! You're a loser, Julian. A broke, pathetic loser." She stood there in the cramped apartment that smelled of mildew and disappointment, her designer dress from better days now wrinkled and stained, her face twisted with a disgust so raw it could cut through steel. Julian stood frozen, watching the woman he had loved for 6 months reveal her true colors in the most brutal way possible. And in that moment, he realized his sister Clara had been right all along. But what Isabella didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that this entire nightmare had been carefully orchestrated, and the truth he was about to reveal would destroy her in ways she never imagined. But let's go back to where it all began, because every disaster has a beautiful beginning, and this one started in the heart of Lagos, where money flowed like the traffic on Third Mainland Bridge, and love was often just another transaction. 3 weeks earlier, Julian's penthouse apartment in Ikoyi smelled of expensive perfume and fresh lilies, a scent that had come to mean love to him, but which his older sister Clara associated with a burning hole in a bank account. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Lagos lagoon, and the sunset painted everything gold, including Isabella as she twirled in front of the massive mirror. She was draped in a shimmering emerald gown that Julian had purchased just hours ago from that boutique on Adiola Oduku Street, and a diamond necklace rested cold and heavy against her collarbone, catching the light with every movement. They were supposed to be packing for a getaway to the Maldives, another lavish trip to add to the string of vacations that had defined their relationship. But Isabella seemed more interested in her reflection than in him. "Does it sparkle enough, babe?" Isabella asked, tilting her head and watching the diamonds dance, not looking at Julian but at the image of herself adorned in his wealth. "It's beautiful, Bella," Julian smiled from the velvet sofa, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the love and devotion, exhaustion had begun to settle in his bones. Clara stood by the balcony door, sipping black coffee and watching the woman her brother claimed to love. A self-made tycoon in the tech industry with offices in both Lagos and Abuja, Clara had eyes that missed nothing, and furthermore, she had developed an instinct for predators after swimming in shark-infested corporate waters for a decade. She watched Isabella with the kind of detached, clinical suspicion that came from years of reading people's intentions before they even knew them themselves, and what she saw made her stomach turn. Later that evening, after Isabella had left for what she called a quick spa appointment at some luxury wellness center in Lekki, Clara decided she couldn't stay silent any longer. She found Julian in his study, staring at his laptop but not really seeing the screen, and she pulled up a chair beside him. "She's bleeding you dry, Julian," Clara said, her voice steady but laced with the kind of concern that only a sister could have. "I've watched her for 2 days now, and I need you to hear me. She doesn't ask about your day or your dreams or even how you're feeling. She asks about your credit limit. She doesn't look at you with love, she looks at you and calculates what you can buy." Julian sighed deeply, rubbing his temples in that way he did when he was tired of fighting. "You don't know her, Clara. You've barely spent time with her and you're already judging. She just likes nice things and I have the money, so why shouldn't I spoil the woman I love?" "There's spoiling and then there's looting," Clara countered, leaning forward so he had to meet her eyes. "She's not in this for your heart, Julian. She's in this for the inheritance, for the properties, for everything you've built. I can see it as clearly as I can see the lagoon from your window." Julian dismissed her accusations with a wave of his hand, attributing them to Clara's naturally protective nature and her general distrust of people who hadn't earned their own money. However, the seed of doubt had been planted, even if it was buried shallow in the soil of his denial. Hey my people, if you're new to this channel, welcome to the family. This story is about to get wild, so if you're already hooked, drop a like and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe because we're building something special here, a community that loves real, raw, emotional stories. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now let's get back to Julian, because that night, everything changed in ways he never expected. The air in the penthouse was heavy with unspoken tension, and while Julian slept fitfully in his bedroom, Clara remained awake because her instincts were screaming at her like alarm bells in the night. Around 2 in the morning, she heard the soft click of a door opening, and she quietly slipped out of the guest room, moving silently into the hallway like a shadow. She watched as Isabella tiptoed into the living room, closing the glass partition behind her with careful precision. And then the woman pulled out a phone. Not her usual iPhone with the diamond-studded case, but a cheap burner phone that looked completely out of place in her manicured hands. Clara crept closer, pressing her back against the wall and then her ear against the cold glass, and what she heard made her blood run cold. I know, stop pressuring me, Marco. Isabella whispered into the phone, and her voice had lost all its usual sweetness and replaced it with something sharp and calculating. I'm working on it. The Maldives trip is booked, and I'm going to push for the ring when we're there. The beaches, the romance, he won't be able to say no. Clara held her breath, afraid that even the sound of her breathing might give her away. He's totally obsessed with me, Isabella scoffed, examining her manicured nails in the moonlight that streamed through the windows. I'll get the ring, wait maybe 6 months or a year to make it look real, and then file for divorce. I've already checked Nigerian marriage laws with a lawyer in Abuja, and I'll get half the properties and a massive settlement. We'll be set for life, Marco. I just have to tolerate his clinginess a little longer. Keep playing the loving girlfriend, and soon enough, we'll be living our best lives on his money. Clara felt a wave of nausea wash over her, and consequently, she retreated to her room before Isabella could finish the call. Her heart pounding not with fear, but with a fury so intense it threatened to consume her. Was Julian's perfect love story actually a carefully planned heist? And would Clara's discovery save her brother or push him into deeper denial? The truth would explode before the week was over. The next morning, breakfast at the penthouse felt like sitting in a freezer, and the tension was so thick you could cut it with the butter knife that sat untouched beside Clara's plate. She had barely slept, her mind replaying Isabella's cold, calculated words over and over like a nightmare on repeat. And now she sat across from her brother, watching him smile at his phone as Isabella sent him heart emojis and good morning messages that made Clara want to scream. Julian looked so happy, so blissfully unaware that the woman he was planning to marry was plotting his financial destruction with another man. And Clara knew she had to tell him everything, even if it meant breaking his heart into pieces so small they might never fit back together. As soon as Isabella left for what she claimed was a boutique opening in Victoria Island, Clara stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the marble floor with a sound that made Julian look up in surprise. She walked around the table, sat down beside him, and took a deep breath because she knew the next few minutes would either save her brother or destroy their relationship forever. Julian, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to listen carefully without interrupting, Clara said, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to stay calm. Last night I heard Isabella on the phone, and what she said, what I heard her say, it's going to hurt you, but you need to know the truth. Julian's smile faded, replaced by confusion and then a flash of defensive anger. Clara, please don't start this again. I thought we were past this. Just listen, Clara insisted. And then she narrated everything she had heard, word for word, sparing no detail about Marco, about the ring, about the divorce plan, about Isabella's lawyer in Abuja who was apparently already preparing paperwork for a massive settlement. She watched her brother's face turn pale and then red, watched his hands grip the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. And she knew that somewhere beneath his denial, the truth was starting to sink in. No, you're lying, Julian said finally, standing up and backing away from her as if she had struck him. You've never liked her, Clara, but this is too far, even for you. Making up stories about phone calls and secret plans. Do you hate seeing me happy that much? I'm not lying to you, Clara snapped, slamming her hand on the marble table so hard that the coffee cups rattled in their saucers. She is a parasite, Julian. She's using you, manipulating you, and she's going to destroy you financially and emotionally. But I knew you wouldn't believe me because love makes people blind, and you're so deep in this illusion that you can't see what's right in front of your face. They stared at each other across the table, siblings who had always been close but who now stood on opposite sides of a canyon that seemed impossible to cross. Julian's jaw was clenched, his eyes filled with hurt and anger, and Clara could see that he was choosing Isabella over her, choosing his fantasy over reality. Clara took a deep breath and softened her tone, because she realized that anger wouldn't save her brother, only proof would. If you trust her so much, then prove me wrong. Let's play a game, Julian, a loyalty test. Julian hesitated, his anger wavering as curiosity crept in. What kind of test? Total ruin, Clara said, and her voice dropped to something dark and serious that made the air in the room feel heavy. Bankruptcy. We fake it completely, freeze your accounts, stage a seizure, lose everything overnight. Let's see if she stays for the man you are, or if she runs the moment the money disappears. Fam, can we just pause for a second? Drop a comment right now and tell me, would you take this test if you were Julian? Would you risk everything to know the truth? Hit that like button if you think Clara's plan is genius, and subscribe to join this storytelling family because the next part is going to blow your mind. Now, back to the moment that would change everything. Julian stared at his sister for what felt like an eternity, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. The part of him that loved Isabella battling against the part that trusted his sister's instincts. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, he spoke. If we do this. And you're wrong, Clara, you have to apologize to Isabella and never question my relationship again, Julian said, his voice heavy with emotion. And if I'm right, Clara asked. Then I'll end it immediately, Julian promised, though even saying the words seemed to cause him physical pain. They spent the next 2 days setting up a foolproof plan, and Clara used every connection she had built over her decade in business to make it happen. She called in favors from friends in banking to temporarily freeze Julian's accounts and make them appear seized by creditors. And furthermore, she hired professional actors from a theatre company in Lagos who specialized in realistic corporate drama scenarios. They rehearsed everything: the timing, the aggression, the legal jargon that would make the bankruptcy seem absolutely real. Every loophole was closed, every detail perfected, because Clara knew they would only get one chance to expose Isabella's true nature, and if they failed, Julian might never trust her again. It happened on a Tuesday morning, and the date was deliberately chosen because Isabella had mentioned wanting to go shopping that afternoon for new luggage for their Maldives trip. Julian sat at the dining table with his head in his hands, and he looked genuinely broken because Clara had coached him on how to embody complete financial devastation. When Isabella walked in expecting her usual morning routine of expensive coffee and compliments, she found instead a man on the verge of tears, and the confusion on her face was almost comical. "What's wrong?" she asked, but her tone was more annoyed than concerned, as if his distress was inconveniencing her day. "It's gone, Bella, all of it," Julian choked out, and his voice cracked in a way that made even Clara feel a pang of sympathy. "The company I over-leveraged on some investments, put too much into crypto and tech stocks, and the market crashed overnight. Everything collapsed. My creditors are calling in the loans, the banks are seizing assets, and I'm bankrupt. Completely bankrupt." Isabella froze, and the blood drained from her face so fast that for a moment Clara thought she might actually faint. "What do you mean bankrupt? That's not possible. You're a billionaire, Julian. Billionaires don't just go bankrupt overnight. They do when they make stupid decisions," Julian said, and he sounded so genuinely defeated that even Clara was impressed by his acting. "What about our trip?" Isabella demanded, and Clara noticed that she didn't ask if Julian was okay or how they would get through this. She asked about the vacation. "What about the Maldives? What about my monthly allowance?" Before Julian could answer, the front door was suddenly battered with such force that both women jumped. 5 men in official-looking uniforms stormed into the penthouse, flashing badges that looked completely legitimate because Clara had paid extra for authenticity. "This property is now seized by First Atlantic Bank," the lead officer shouted, his voice echoing through the apartment. "You have exactly 10 minutes to vacate the premises. Anything left behind becomes bank property, and any resistance will result in arrest." The chaos that followed was absolute and terrifying. The actors moved through the penthouse like a well-oiled machine, tagging furniture with seizure stickers and barking orders at each other about asset values and liquidation procedures. Julian grabbed Isabella's hand, his grip desperate and pleading. "Baby, we have to go right now. They're taking the cars, the artwork, everything. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for failing you like this," Julian begged, and his performance was so convincing that Clara almost believed he was actually sorry. Isabella was hyperventilating, clutching her jewelry box to her chest like it was a life raft in a storm. "Where are we supposed to go, Julian?" "Where?" "The apartment downtown," Julian said, referring to a modest 2-bedroom flat in Yaba that he owned but had let Isabella claim as her personal space before she moved into the penthouse. "We can stay there until I figure out how to rebuild. I'll get back on my feet, I promise. We'll get through this together." Isabella looked at him with an expression that Clara would never forget, pure, undiluted disgust, as if Julian had suddenly transformed into something she found beneath a rock. But with the officers shouting and the chaos swirling around them, she had no choice but to follow him out of the penthouse and into a life she had never prepared for. Would Isabella survive even 1 week without luxury? Or would the mask crack faster than anyone expected? The real test was just beginning, and the results would be more devastating than Julian ever imagined. The apartment in Yaba was everything Isabella had nightmares about, and the horror on her face when they arrived was so raw and genuine that Julian almost broke character right there in the doorway. The walls were painted a faded yellow that might have been white decades ago, and the paint was peeling in sad, curling strips that reminded Clara of dead skin. The cheap refrigerator hummed like an old man with breathing problems, and the furniture looked like it had been rejected by a second-hand store before ending up here, sagging and worn in ways that spoke of countless tenants who had given up on their dreams. This was the opposite of the penthouse, the opposite of everything Isabella had signed up for, and watching her step into that apartment was like watching a princess being thrown into a dungeon. Except this princess had no noble qualities hidden beneath her designer clothes. The first week was a nightmare that unfolded in slow motion, and Julian documented every moment in his mind like evidence for a trial. The glamour that had defined Isabella's entire existence was gone, completely stripped away and replaced by the harsh reality of ordinary life. And moreover, Isabella's mask didn't just slip. It shattered into 1,000 pieces that cut everyone around her. She refused to cook, and when Julian gently suggested that maybe they could prepare meals together like a normal couple, she looked at him as if he had asked her to eat dirt. She refused to clean, leaving her expensive clothes draped over every surface like flags marking conquered territory. She refused to even speak to him civilly, and her tone shifted from sweet and loving to sharp and venomous in a way that would have been shocking if Clara hadn't already known the truth. "I can't believe you did this to me," Isabella screamed one evening, standing in the middle of the cramped living room with her arms crossed over her chest. "You had one job, Julian, one job, and that was to stay rich. You embarrassed me. I can't even show my face to my friends anymore because they're all asking questions about why we're not posting vacation photos, why I'm not at the boutique openings, why I'm suddenly living like some common person. I thought we were a team," Julian pleaded, sitting on the worn-out couch that smelled faintly of mold and disappointment. "I thought you loved me for more than just money. I just need time to figure things out, to rebuild, and I need you to support me through this the way I've supported every dream you've ever had." "Time doesn't buy Gucci, Julian," Isabella shot back, and her voice was so cold it could have frozen the Lagos heat outside. "Time doesn't keep me in the lifestyle I deserve. I didn't sign up for this poverty nonsense." Clara, who was monitoring everything through updates from Julian's secret phone calls, felt vindicated, but also deeply sad for her brother. She had been right about Isabella, but being right didn't make watching Julian suffer any easier. The abuse escalated in ways that shocked even Clara, who had expected Isabella to be cold but not outright cruel. The worst part was the food situation, because Isabella had discovered a new weapon in her arsenal of psychological torture. She would cook elaborate meals for herself, jollof rice with perfectly seasoned chicken, or pasta with creamy sauce that filled the apartment with aromas that made Julian's stomach growl like a wounded animal. She would eat slowly, deliberately, making sure Julian could see every bite she took. And when he would ask if there was enough for him, she would look at him with such contempt that it was worse than any physical blow. "If you're hungry, get a job," she spat one evening, twirling pasta on her fork while Julian sat at the other end of the small table with an empty plate in front of him. "I'm not a charity organization and I'm not your mother. You want to eat? Figure it out yourself." She began to starve him systematically, cooking only enough for herself and sometimes even throwing away leftovers rather than letting him have them. However, what Isabella didn't know, what she couldn't have known because she was too self-absorbed to notice, was that Julian still had his phone and a secret credit card hidden in the lining of his shoe, tucked away during their hasty exit from the penthouse. When Isabella would storm out of the apartment in one of her rages, slamming the door so hard the walls shook, Julian would immediately pull out his phone and call a delivery service. He would order steak and jollof rice and chicken suya and all the foods he had been craving, and he would feast like a king in secret, careful to dispose of all the containers in the dumpster outside, and air out the apartment with cheap air freshener before Isabella returned. "Hey my people, can we talk about this for a second? This woman is really starving a man in his own apartment. Drop a like if you think Isabella is getting exactly what she deserves at the end of this story, and comment below telling me the craziest thing an ex ever did to you. Don't forget to subscribe because this story is about to reach levels of drama you won't believe." Now let's get back to Isabella, because her true colors were about to get even darker. The disrespect eventually turned into something that crossed a line Julian never thought she would cross: infidelity. And she didn't even bother hiding it anymore. She stopped pretending to care about his feelings or their relationship, and she began leaving the apartment in the evenings, dressed in the few expensive outfits she had managed to save from the penthouse seizure. Julian would watch from the grimy window as a sleek black Mercedes would pull up outside, the kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood, and a man would be waiting in the driver's seat. Isabella would hop in without a backward glance, laughing in a way that Julian hadn't heard in weeks, and the sound of her happiness with someone else cut deeper than any of her insults ever could. She would return late, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning, smelling of expensive men's cologne and alcohol, stumbling through the door with her heels in her hand. She would ignore Julian completely as he lay on the couch pretending to sleep, and she would go straight to the bedroom and lock the door behind her, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his heartbreak. Clara called him every night during those 3 weeks, checking on him and making sure he was holding up under the psychological warfare Isabella was wagging. "Are you okay?" she would ask, her voice filled with concern. "Do you need me to end this? We have enough evidence now, Julian. You've seen who she really is." "Not yet," Julian would respond, his voice hollow but determined. "I need to see how far she'll go. I need to know the absolute worst of who she is, because if I end this too soon, I'll always wonder if maybe she would have changed, if maybe she just needed more time to adjust." "She's not going to change," Clara warned him. "People like Isabella don't change, they just get better at hiding who they are." But Julian insisted on seeing it through to the bitter end, and the bitter end came on a Tuesday afternoon exactly 3 weeks after the staged bankruptcy. Isabella walked into the apartment at noon, hungover and irritable, with her makeup smudged and her dress wrinkled in ways that told stories Julian didn't want to imagine. She threw her purse on the floor with such force that the contents spilled out: lipstick, a hotel room keycard, and condoms that she didn't even try to hide. Julian was sitting on the couch reading a book, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in this nightmare, when Isabella looked at him with eyes that held nothing but contempt. "Get out," she said, and her voice was calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than her screaming. Julian looked up from his book, his heart suddenly racing. "What?" "I said get out," Isabella repeated, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm done with this, I'm done with you. I can't live like a rat anymore, and honestly, looking at you every day makes me physically sick. I found someone else, someone who can actually take care of me the way I deserve, someone who has money and power and doesn't lose everything overnight like some amateur. This is my apartment, my name is on the lease, so get out." Julian stood up slowly, and something in his posture changed. He didn't look sad anymore, didn't look broken or defeated or like a man who had lost everything. He stood to his full height, his shoulders squared, and his entire demeanor shifted from that of a broken man to the CEO he had always been. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Isabella?" Julian asked, and his voice was frighteningly calm, like the eye of a hurricane. "Get out," Isabella screamed, grabbing a cushion from the couch and throwing it at his head. "You're a loser, Julian, a broke, pathetic loser, and I can't believe I wasted 6 months of my life on you." Was this really the end? Or was Julian about to reveal a truth that would destroy Isabella's entire world? The revenge was coming, and it would be more brutal than anyone could have imagined. Julian caught the cushion midair with one hand, and the movement was so smooth and controlled that it made Isabella pause for just a second, confusion flickering across her face before the anger returned. He dropped the cushion deliberately onto the floor, and then he pulled out his phone from his pocket. Not the old, cheap phone he had been pretending to use, but his actual iPhone, the one with the custom case that Isabella had always admired back when she thought his money would be hers forever. His fingers moved across the screen with the confidence of a man who had never lost control of anything, and he typed a simple message that would change everything in the next 60 seconds. "It's over, bring the car," Julian typed, and he hit send without breaking eye contact with Isabella. Suddenly, from outside the apartment, the sound of a heavy engine purred to life, and it wasn't just any engine. It was the distinctive, powerful rumble of a Rolls-Royce, the kind of sound that didn't belong in Yaba, the kind of sound that made people stop whatever they were doing and look outside to see who had arrived. Julian walked to the door with the calm, measured steps of a man who owned the world, and he opened it wide so that Isabella could see exactly what was waiting outside. The afternoon sun glinted off the pristine black paint of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, and sitting in the back seat with a smile that could cut glass was Clara, looking every bit the tech mogul she was, dressed in a power suit that probably cost more than 3 months' rent in this building. Julian turned back to face Isabella, and when he spoke, his voice was cold as ice, empty of all the love and warmth that had defined their relationship for 6 months. "You're right about one thing, Isabella. This was a test." Isabella's face went from angry to confused in less than a second. "What are you talking about? What test?" "My sister told me you were a gold digger," Julian said, and each word fell like a hammer striking an anvil. "She told me you were using me, that you didn't love me but loved what I could buy for you. She even told me she overheard you on the phone talking to someone named Marco about your plan to marry me, wait a year, and then divorce me for half of everything I own. But I didn't want to believe her, Isabella. I loved you so much that I was willing to lose everything just to prove my sister wrong." The colour drained from Isabella's face so fast she looked like she had seen a ghost, and her legs seemed to lose their strength because she stumbled backward until she hit the wall. "Julian, I can explain, but you couldn't even stick by me for 3 weeks," Julian continued, his voice getting quieter but somehow more devastating with each sentence. 3 weeks, Isabella. That's all it took for you to show me exactly who you are. You starved me, or at least you tried to. You disrespected me in ways I didn't think were possible. You cheated on me openly, flaunting other men in my face like I was nothing. And now you're throwing me out of an apartment that you think is yours. But here's the thing. Julian took a step closer to her, and Isabella pressed herself against the wall as if she could disappear into it. I'm not bankrupt, he revealed, and a cruel smile played on his lips. The police were actors from a theatre company in Cerula. The seizure was completely staged. Every single account that was supposedly frozen, still active and full. The company that supposedly collapsed, posted record profits last week. I still have the billions, Isabella. I still have the penthouses and the cars and the private jets and everything else. I just wanted to see if you were worthy of sharing any of it, and you failed spectacularly. Fam, let me tell you something right now. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. If you're feeling this revenge, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me if you think Julian went too far or if Isabella deserved every second of this. Subscribe to the family because the final episode is going to leave you speechless, I promise you that. Now watch what happens next, because Isabella's world is about to completely collapse. Isabella's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and no sounds came out for what felt like an eternity. Then suddenly, as the full weight of what Julian had just said crashed down on her, she fell to her knees with a thud that echoed in the small apartment. She scrambled toward him on her hands and knees like a beggar in the street, her expensive dress dragging across the dirty floor, and she grabbed at his pant leg with both hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the fabric desperately. Julian, wait, please. Isabella sobbed and tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of genuine remorse. They were tears of panic, tears of a woman watching her meal ticket drive away forever. I was just stressed, I didn't mean any of it. Baby, please, you have to understand. I was scared and confused and I wasn't thinking clearly. I love you. I've always loved you. It was just the pressure of everything and I reacted badly, but I love you so much. Julian looked down at her, and his eyes were completely void of emotion, like he was looking at a stranger or maybe at something even less significant than that. He had loved this woman with everything he had bought her dreams and wrapped her in luxury, had imagined a future with children and grandchildren and growing old together, but now all he felt was a cold emptiness where that love used to live. You didn't love me, Julian said softly, and his gentleness was somehow more cruel than anger would have been. You never loved me, Isabella. You loved the lifestyle. You loved the penthouse and the cars and the shopping trips and the Instagram photos that made your friends jealous. You loved what I could do for you, not who I was. And now you have neither the lifestyle nor me. Isabella's sobbing intensified, and she tried to climb up his leg like a child, her makeup running in black rivers down her face. I'll change, I promise I'll change. Give me another chance, Julian, I'll be better. I'll be the woman you deserve. Please don't leave me like this. Julian gently but firmly kicked her hands away from his leg, and the movement was so final, so completely done with her, that Isabella collapsed onto the floor in a heap of designer fabric and broken dreams. He stepped over her as if she were just another piece of furniture in this apartment, and furthermore, he leaned down close to her ear one last time. Oh, and one more thing, Isabella, Julian whispered, and his breath was warm against her ear, but his words were ice cold. The rent for this apartment, I stopped the automatic payment this morning. The landlord is coming in about an hour to evict you for non-payment, and since your name is on the lease like you so proudly reminded me, you're the one who's legally responsible for the debt. Good luck with that. And Marco, the man you've been planning this whole scheme with, I had him investigated. He's married with 3 children in Abuja, and his wife is a lawyer who specializes in fraud cases. I've already sent her copies of all your text messages and phone records. She's very interested in meeting you. Isabella's scream of horror was still echoing in Julian's ears as he walked out the door, stepping into the bright Lagos afternoon where the Rolls-Royce waited like a chariot sent from heaven. He slid into the leather back seat next to Clara, and the door closed with the satisfying thunk of German engineering, shutting out Isabella's screams and pleas and the entire nightmare of the last 3 weeks. The car pulled away smoothly, and Julian didn't look back at the woman who was now scrambling out of the apartment building, running after the car in her bare feet and screaming his name so loudly that people were coming out of their houses to watch the drama unfold. You were right, Julian said finally, taking a deep breath of the air-conditioned, leather-scented air that smelled like success and vindication. I usually am, Clara replied, squeezing his hand with genuine affection and relief. Now let's go get some real food. I know you're tired of sneaking takeout and pretending to starve. They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the Lagos traffic parting before them as if even the Danfo buses and Okadas knew to give way to power and wealth. Julian stared out the window, watching the city pass by, and he felt like he was waking up from a long, terrible dream. Clara watched her brother carefully, seeing the way his shoulders gradually relaxed and the tension left his jaw, and she knew he would be okay eventually, even if the scars from Isabella would take time to heal. "Where are we going?" Julian asked, finally turning to look at his sister. "The penthouse, of course," Clara smiled. "Your real penthouse in Ikoyi, the one that was never actually seized. I had the housekeepers prepare your favorite meal, and I think there's a bottle of champagne with our names on it." The Rolls-Royce glided through the streets of Lagos, carrying Julian away from the poverty and pain of Yaba and back toward the life he had never actually lost. But as they approached the bridge that would take them back to Ikoyi, Clara's phone buzzed with a message that made her face go pale. She read it once, then twice, and then she looked at Julian with an expression he had never seen before: genuine fear. "Julian," Clara said slowly, her voice shaking slightly. "We have a problem, a very serious problem." "What is it?" Julian asked, but something in his sister's tone made his stomach drop. "Isabella isn't who we thought she was," Clara whispered, holding up her phone so he could see the message from her private investigator. "Her real name isn't even Isabella, and Marco, he's not just some random boyfriend, he's—" But before Clara could finish her sentence, the Rolls-Royce suddenly swerved violently, and the driver shouted a warning that got lost in the screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal against metal. What was Isabella's real identity? And who was Marco really working for? The game they thought they had won was actually just beginning, and the stakes had just become deadly. If you enjoyed the first part of this story, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notification bell, so when part 2 drops you'll be the first to know. And drop a comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story is traveling across the world.